to walk you through our web-based risk register and our dashboard, risk dashboard at WSSC Water. Then the second piece is to work on what could be a kind of template risk register. And if we still have time, to start really drilling down on what could be a generic risk matrix threshold that we could use. So maybe first, before showing you what it is, give you a little bit of context for the web-based risk register. So where I came from, we had a tool which was a GRC tool, a governance, risk and compliance tool. It was what we call in French a gas plant, meaning that it was like extremely complex, extremely time consuming. So having built from that, when I joined WSSC Water, we started with Excel spreadsheets as most of the people do. However, in the 21st century in the United States, playing with Excel spreadsheets is obviously not optimum. So I wrote a kind of functional specification on what a simple risk tool could look like, to have a single repository where all the risk registers are captured. I'm not a geek, I'm not an IT genius by far, so I engage with my colleagues in IT and say, okay, how feasible does it look like for you guys? And with what we have in terms of tool at WSSC Water, in a nutshell, it took them like 3 months, not full time, but 3 months in total to develop what you're going to see. So it's not perfect, but it does the job, and it's simple. This is what we want when I believe we start this exercise in a company where there's no pre-existing, I would say, maturity in risk management. So let me show you what it looks like. So here I have created, for the purpose of this meeting, some few risks. So basically we have a risk register where people are entering their risk. So you choose the risk register that you want to input your risk on. So here I have created ERM. The event type, is it a risk or is it an opportunity? The cause that triggered the risk, so here I've put blah, 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 blah. The description of the risk, what is our risk? The impact, that you can call also consequences. Who is the owner of the probability of this risk, and ties directly to the other work that we're going to do, which is the threshold and the risk matrix. The severity of this risk, how severe, how serious is that risk? Same thing, tied directly to the threshold on the risk matrix. The type of response that we want to bring to this risk as a company, meaning, do we want to take this risk? Do we want to terminate this risk? Do we want to transfer to a third party, for example, this risk? Or do we want to treat it, which is another word for mitigating? What treatment or mitigation do we want to lay down? The progress on those mitigation and the status of this risk. Is it open or is it closed? Here you see an event category, which is what is the nature of this risk? Is it a, so here we have created at WSSC Water what we call our RBS, which is an acronym for risk breakdown structure, which you can call also a risk universe. That's the same thing. So is it an accounting risk? Is it a financial risk? Is it an ethics risk? So what is the inherent nature of this risk? So you do that in your risk register. This is where you are entering all your risks. So here I have all the risks of the company. This is the central repository. This is the data source. Once we've done that, do you see another screen here, or do you still see the same screen? Just for me to know if I have to get out of this screen to come back in.
I see another screen.
Good, wonderful. So here we have what we call, in another application, we have what we call our risk dashboard. So bear with me a second. Yeah. So here, based upon the 3 risks I have entered for the purpose of this presentation, we are at our risk dashboard with several kind of views. So you have the total number of risks, and it shows those that are open, those that are closed. The risk score at the moment where you extract your dashboard. So this is a very interesting, what we call key risk indicator, because obviously this is what you want to monitor very closely. How, depending on the progress and the effectiveness of the mitigation measures that you are implementing, how your risk score is evolving. And obviously you want to drive it to the orange and then to the green zone. Here I had entered, and I will show you what it gives, but I had entered 1 risk of each profile, meaning red, orange, and green. So it gives you also the split of all your risks that you have, depending on their profile. The number of, so that's an interesting picture also, because obviously you want to track how the number of red zone risks are evolving. Then you have the number of days your risks are open. So when you are devising some mitigation strategies, some of them may be kind of a long shot type of small project, if you will. However, you have also low hanging fruit. So you want to make sure you revisit regularly for how long the risks have been open, and if there are some mitigation strategies that are really huge contributors to address this risk, you may want to reshift the priorities of the team toward those risks versus, I would say, the ongoing business. Here, of course, I have only 3 risks, but basically it gives you a breakdown on for how long by, I would say, a milestone, the risks have been open. And here, since I prepared that at the end of last week, you don't have the trends, but here basically you have trends from quarter to quarter. And you have this view here, both for the risks and for the opportunities. For the purpose of this exercise, I have not entered opportunities, but that's what it gives you. So if now you give me 1 second, I can show you, without disclosing any secret, what it gives for WSSC Water at large. So across the company, as you can see, we have 243 risks. What I mentioned, close, open, risk score, and the breakdown by risk type. Here you see black box. It's what we call the black swan, meaning, just as a reminder, very unlikely probability to occur, but should the risk occur would be a massive impact. Typically speaking, a pandemic, an act of God, for example. And the number of days I was mentioning. Here, as you can see, since we've been starting this exercise more than a year ago, we have some trends across the board. On the second tab of, before I go to the more detailed piece, do you have any question on what I've gone through so far?
Hello, this is Kathleen. I have a quick question.
Hey, good morning, Kathleen.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I joined a little late. So open and close. This is enterprise risks. Do you have risks which are kind of perpetual? And the close, what happens if something actually happens, right? So pandemic is a risk and now it's happened. Does that risk get closed and it moves to a, you know?
Yeah. Very good point, Catherine. As we recall, a risk is an uncertain event. And should the doctor would have a massive or an impact on the objective, right? When the risk is materializing, meaning when the risk occurs, it's not a risk any longer. It's dealt with in a company, but as a project or as an issue or as something. So yes, it is closed from the risk register, unless there's some cascading risk to that fact that materialized. Yes, it is.
So do you want your number, you have whatever it is, 240 something, is there a goal to reduce that number? Or?
No, the goal is not really weighed in terms of number of risk, but really what you want to monitor is your overall risk score in the company, right? And you really want to monitor those ones, the red zone risks. Okay. You really want to monitor that you contain the number of red zone risk, which may increase the number of orange zone risk or the number of green zone risk. That's fine. That's part of the risk management process. But those are really the ones you want to have a close focus on.
Thanks.
Hey, Hélène, it's Mike. I had a question. I recall in the workshop you talked about using bow tie diagrams. I know you had a place where you entered risk. Do you use that and use the outcome of a bow tie diagram analysis to help you enter the data here?
Okay, yeah. So I switched screen. Do you see a new screen now than the dashboard?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So the bow tie diagram is really the causes on the one hand, the impact or consequences on the other end, and the description in the middle. That's the bow tie. So when we describe the causes and the impact, we make sure that we describe as precisely as possible, and we come back to it. I mean, it's an iterative process. We come back to it as precisely as possible, the causes and the impact, because why? Because the mitigations or the treatment are about controlling the causes and or reducing the impact. So the more precise you've been in identifying your causes and your impact, the easier you will find your mitigation strategies.
Okay, good. And the other question I had is, it looks like a lot of data comes from this kind of analysis, but do you ever use other kind of data that you have organizationally, like audits or other information, or does the input data come entirely from the experts that are assessing these risks?
Again, a risk is an uncertain event. Okay, so here you are trying to project yourself on how your future could be versus your objective. So sometimes, okay, let's take the example of a pandemic. That's a bad example because this is an inherent risk, so it's not really a specific risk to a company. But let's take the example of a pandemic. So you say we have a risk of a pandemic. Let's imagine we are not in COVID now. So in terms of data, in terms of cause, you could have in 1918, there was a worldwide pandemic. Okay. You could look at the historical data. How often, since data are collected, have we seen some pandemics? So many times, right?
Right.
Okay. So you can use it in this way, but risks are really trying to project yourself with the available information that you have, so inside the company, but also in the outside world, your experience, your colleagues' input, to figure out what could be at that very moment the future about that risk. So it is not always, and actually very often it is not, a data collection. No, it's not. It's not like a KPI, or it's not like when you design some targets where you want to look at your historical data to try to assess based on the past how your future could look like. Here you are in a much more subjective world, and we have to accept that, meaning that there's no truth. In the same room, for the same risk, you can have some colleagues who see this risk as small and some other colleagues who see this risk as big. Right. And here, what you really want to drill into is, why do you see it small? Why do you see it big? And most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, after this discussion has occurred, there's some sort of alignment, which might not be something in the middle. It's not a compromise. It's really people who did not have the same level of information. Right. So I've rarely seen in a decade I've been doing risk management a kind of diverging view after this discussion have occurred. So we are using the bow tie approach. Cause, description, and impact is a bow tie structure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is it? Do you update it like weekly, monthly, quarterly? How frequently do you change the data?
Yeah, I am meeting with all the teams, so meaning all the directors and the DGMs on a quarterly basis. This is, I would say, like rigorous, systematic, automatic, and I am not deviating for that. And actually, they are not deviating for that either, because I would say at this level, risks are dynamic, but not so dynamic. When you do risk management on a project, so of course it depends on your project, but I was doing it on a monthly basis. So it really depends on the environment you are involving into. Yeah, on a project, I would really suggest to have it, I don't know, every month, every 6 weeks. It doesn't have to be like...
doesn't have to be daily.
No. But yeah, every quarter I am meeting with the directors, and then I'm meeting with the DGMs, and then I am issuing my quarterly risk report.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Helene. This is Chris.
Yeah, hello, Chris. How are you?
Good, thanks. It's just very good to see this type of dashboard and online risk entry tool. Just have a question around the risk breakdown structure that you mentioned. So do you have that for the entire organizations, or is it like segment by segment? And do you have some sort of a visual in this tool, like in terms of like tree structure, I guess, decomposing like high to low? And also, how, like, do you update as you are introducing more risk, I guess, to different areas?
Okay, so first question, Chris. Yes, we do have a risk breakdown structure. If you see my screen, I have pulled it up. So a risk breakdown structure. Do you see my screen, Chris?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is another tool, another artifact I think we might want to work on all together. The risk universe or risk breakdown structure does not copy-paste the organization chart of a company. It really highlight and, if you will, rank the categories of risk. Okay. So for WSSC Water, for example, strategy, we have governance, external stakeholder, commissioners, strategic partners, communication, customers, innovation, transformation. Okay. For example, in your company, for some reasons that are really inherent to the business of your company, you may have a much streamlined risk breakdown structure with different headers, with different sub component. We have it. Yeah. It's
Hey,
really,
Hélène, sorry to interrupt, but this is really interesting. Would you say that these are organizational goals or related to them?
of course, I mean, enterprise risk management is informing the strategic plan. And as you review the strategic plan, and on this piece, our colleagues from Oregon did something really good, because your strategic plan, if you remember what Mert and the Portland Bureau said, was a risk-based approach, because your risk and opportunities are going to inform your strategic plan, meaning your priorities, the initiative underlying your priorities, the actions under the initiative. So you may call it differently in your organizations. And it's going to be also that same iterative cycle. If you have a major opportunity that arises, you want to include it in your strategic priorities, and then you want to design some initiative under that priority, and then convert that into action that have some risk and opportunities that you are going to monitor, etc., etc. Absolutely, absolutely. The risks and opportunities, if you recall, are always linked to an objective. A project objective could be, for example, to complete this project in 24 months. That's the objective of the project. What risks are out there that could impact the achievement of this objective? As a company, you have for example, a strategic priority to deliver clean water without any violation to your customer, for example. What could be the elements that could impact this strategic objective?
But it looks like you've broken it down, more than strategy, but also to each individual part of the organization in a kind of hierarchy. Did I get that right?
Again, it's not tied to an organization chart.
Right.
This one does not reflect WSSC Water organization chart. But what are the big risk factors for the company? So asset technology, operation, human resources, legal, blah, 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 blah. And under that, what are the subcategory, if you will, of risk that could be out there?
Right. Okay, thank you.
So you might have mentioned this, but do you have a register for risk register for each of these? I guess the blue boxes there, like one for strategy, one for IT, one for human resources.
Okay, so let me bring this back up, Chris. So this risk breakdown structure is here, event category. What kind of risk is it? Okay, it's not a, how shall I put it? Those are not, those are category of risk. Is it a financial risk? Is it an organization risk? Is it an asset risk? It's a category of risk, okay? It's not a, how shall I say? It doesn't correspond to a division that would be called strategy at WSSC Water, if you see what I mean. Again, it's not a replication of an organization chart, but the nature of your risk, okay?
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe to show you another view that we have more drilled down on the risk dashboard. So here you have the split, or let's say the spread of the risks by probability and by severity across the board. So here, of course, you really want, again, to focus on the high probability with massive impact. And again, I have entered for the purpose of this meeting only 3 risk and no opportunities, but the same thing for opportunities. You want to focus on the big ticket item. Here you have another view of this with a scattered chart. And here we have exactly what we were talking about, Chris, a moment ago, the split of the risk by category. So here's the company, does the company have most of its red zone risk as financial risk, as asset risks, as blah, 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 blah. And what does it do to you? This is helping you really to focus on where the nature of the risk is. Let's imagine most of the red zone risk of a company are in finance for whatever reason, okay? So you really want to focus your efforts in identifying why exactly in finance, what those risks are tied to. Is there some connection in between those risks that address a root cause common to all those risks or not? But that allows you to go one step further and to make a more thorough analysis. So of course, when you have a lot of risk, you have all the elements of your breakdown structure, and you have the big ticket items that are there. And finally, the dashboard is providing the risk register. So here, for again, the one that I have created for the purpose of this meeting, you have several views. So an HTLM view, which is here, or you have the Excel view, and I'm just going to put it up in front of you. Hopefully you're going to be able to see it. Okay, so do you see my Excel spreadsheet?
Not yet.
You don't see it? Okay. So let me try to do that. Excel spreadsheet, okay. So by clicking on this button submit, it has pulled up the Excel format of the risk register. So of course, in terms of presentation, I hide a couple of columns that are useless for the purpose of my attendance. But each column is taking the data from the web-based risk register that I have just shown you a moment ago. And there's a reason for that. For example, when you see risk ID, it's system generated. I do not act upon that. And why I want to keep this, even if I hide it? Because while developing the mitigation strategies, I'm going to a Smartsheet program, and I tie the mitigation strategy detailed plan to this risk ID. So basically, when I click on my Smartsheet, it brings me back here, or when I click here, which is not the case for this one because I made it up, here there's a link directly that takes me to a Smartsheet where the mitigation strategy detailed plan is, and it is monitored just as a project with percentage of completion, the start date, end date, all the action owners, etc., etc. So typically speaking, if I want to do very quickly the exercise in front of you, I'm hiding those columns up for the purpose of reporting. Voila. And it gives me a risk register, which tells me who is the owner of this risk register. So, for example, the director of production. Is it a risk or an opportunity? What is the nature of this risk? Is it a financial risk? Blah, 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 coming from the risk breakdown. The cause, the description of that risk, the impact of that risk. How do we want to address this risk? Do we want to take it, terminate it, treat it, or transfer it? What mitigation high level do we want to do for this risk? And how do we progress on the mitigation? Who is owning this risk? Is it open or closed? the score of this risk, probability, severity. Voila. Any question?
Elaine, how willing have you found the organization be to adding opportunities as well as risks?
If you've seen my dashboard a moment ago when I showed you the overall view for WSSC Water, we have 70 opportunities identified, and we have 240 risk total identified. So it tells me the company is pretty willing to recognize opportunities. And actually, what I'm doing in my risk workshop, not on a systematic basis, but very frequently, I start with this positive note, and I am asking my audience to start finding opportunities before we talk about risk.
Right.
So I tell them, okay, today, in what you know, in your sphere, what is the top opportunity that you have? If WSSC Water was your company with your money, what opportunity would you go and seek in order to make it even more profitable or successful? That's, yeah.
And do you, in your total measure of risk and opportunity, take into account both? So when you report, you're reporting not just all of the threats that you have, but the risks that you have, but the opportunities as well.
Yes, yes, I do, Michael, absolutely. And I do report them in different views, of course, using the risk dashboard, and I report them also per strategic priorities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Elaine, this is Scott. Maybe you could, it's a governance question. You have risk owners and you have you have your executive team, you have other teams. How are these, I assume that your executive team isn't really dealing with 243 risks, but how do they decide which ones they're going to deal with as opposed to basically risk owners handling other risks?
Okay, excellent question, Scott. So amongst those 200 or something risks that are there, as you've seen, we are, as an enterprise level, we are focusing on the red zone risk, right? Across those red zone risks, they are similar risk. It's worded differently. It's approached differently, but the core of the risk is the same. So this is part of the work I'm doing on a quarterly basis, where I am reporting the top risk for the company, meaning that I consolidate it. I have a methodology for that, and that methodology works at the beginning. And let me explain why. So this methodology consisted in identifying the number of directors who have identified the same risk. What was the average score for that risk divided by the number of directors? Was there on those risks identified by the directors a black swan? Because a black swan, we have to be careful. When it occurs, it's again a massive impact. What is the velocity? What do we call the velocity? Is it a short-term risk that could potentially materialize like tomorrow or within the next 3 months, or is it like more longer-term thing? Those are some parameters that I lay down a process for, and add a calculation sheet, and the strict score was dictating basically which was the highest risk and how do they rank. Because we do not want to go into the weeds of, yeah, this score is 15, this score is 16. Yeah, it's in the red zone risk. So there's a part of subjectivity. Do not want to get in those kind of what I call Mickey Mouse discussion. It's a red zone risk. So we have made 3 groups, like the top risk, the top risk, and the a bit less top risk, all in the red zone risk, okay? But we made some classification like that. So I brought this classification, and once a quarter, now it's gone twice a year because we have matured a little bit. I was organizing what I called the directors and DGM's risk workshop with the CEO of the company, which is actually nothing more and nothing less than a risk assurance committee, RAC, as we call it. And I was sending my report kind of a week before, and it was the purpose of that meeting was to align those executives on the perception for that quarter of the top risk for the company, to confirm assignment of ownership. Is, for example, this risk belong to the director of IT or not? And also, well, I've used different formats, but some of the formats I have used during those meetings was to have those directors work together in small groups, trying to highlight a couple of smart mitigation strategies, okay, when they were not yet designed, because there were some new risks. Now that we've been a bit more than a year into the program, yes, we are in a dynamic environment, but I mean, to a certain extent. So you see those risks that are coming back. So it's almost at this stage, what I would say, inherent risk to the company. So yes, during the risk workshop, we still ask, do you have some new risk that you see coming up? But what we have decided starting this quarter is that this pool of top 10 risks that we have for the company, to really take them on and address them in a detail, like mini project, if you will. So this is what we are doing. So I have created subsequently some risk mitigation working groups. That's how I call them. It can be called anyhow, and not with the directors, but with the teams, cross-functional teams at every level, but expert that could really help advancing the mitigation on that risk. Have I answered your questions?
That was good. That was good. Thank you, Helene.
Okay. Any other question, comments? Brilliant ideas, I take it all. No? Okay. So we have in your organization, before we switch gears and kind of work more in depth on how could risk register could look like. In your organization, do you have a central repository for risk register would be my first question. And which shape does it have, if so?
When you say which shape, you mean whether it's the format or the tool, or like whether it's an Excel or whether it's a database or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you, Cello. It's indeed what I meant.
Yeah.
Chris, maybe you would want to tell us.
Or I can for Metro Vancouver. So for Metro Vancouver, we don't have one for the organization, and we're in the midst of developing one for one of the departments, which is Liquid Waste Services.
And you are developing it in a tool, Rick, or you are going to use Excel spreadsheets or PowerPoints or something else? What's your idea?
We'll start with an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
And yeah, one question that I had, I didn't have my mic on about your system. So you're monitoring the treatments or the actions that you have going on. Is that built into your kind of status of like a forward-looking indicator on the status of your risks?
Oh, absolutely, risk. I mean, risk management. I mean, when we cut all the rest, it's about dealing with your risk, addressing your risk. So, I mean, I can show you. Without going too much into details, but bear with me a quick second. If I can show it to you, how a detailed plan in Smartsheet I was referring to look like. So give me 1 second to put it up. Yeah, I mean, the only way, I mean, it has never happened, but if somebody was telling me, okay, yeah, this risk was red last quarter, but now it is green, I said, okay, what did you do to go from red to green? And if the answer was, well, just because now I feel it's green, I said, well, that's not going to work. So, I mean, mitigating your risk or addressing your risk is the only way. Circumstances change, of course, to reduce your risk profile. So let me see. And of course, I cannot go into a lot of detail because this is internal to WSSC Water, but just to give you an example. So here we have one risk, okay, one of the top risks of the company. And here, again, I cannot show you the entire thing, but we have some mitigation strategies, and below you have the plan. So there's a risk owner for the risk, but there's action owners, start date, end date, percentage completion date. Here, and all is not filled in because, as I said, we have started to drill down this quarter. How much this mitigation contributes to reduce the risk? What is the success measure? So typically speaking, that would be a KPI that we still need to develop, and the supporting documents. So you may remember a moment ago I said, when I showed you the extract of the Excel spreadsheet, that there's a smart link in there. That would be where the link would be. I would tie it to the ID of the risk. I would click on it to bring back the risk, and the same thing when I'm on my Excel spreadsheet where the risk is, clicking on the smart link, it will bring me directly to this spreadsheet.
Okay, thanks.
Any question? No? Okay. Okay. Good. Are you happy? We have only not even 15 minutes. Are you happy that we start looking at the risk register and how it could look like as a common tool? Yeah, cool. I see Rick's thumbs up. Good. So, all right. So, again, the suggestion is...
Helen, I'm sorry, this is Kathleen. Can you hear me? I have a lawnmower going on in the background.
Yeah, I can hear you very well, Kathleen.
Okay. Can you just go back to the dashboard for a second before we move on? Because I want to see what kind of things you're reporting, and particularly like how you get the mitigation side. Is there any reporting on the mitigation on the dashboard itself, or is it only just risks?
No, the dashboard, Kathleen, is only to report the consolidated risk profile for the company.
Okay.
Do you want me to pull it up again?
If you don't mind.
Sure. So let me up. Okay. Bear with me. So I'm on the network of the company, so that's why it's a bit slow for me to be at the same time on a call. And so let me see if I can. Okay, right. Okay. So that's the overall view, Kathleen. Oops. You see it?
Yep. So you're showing the number of risks, the score.
The ones that are open and closed, which is also a very good indicator on basically how the company is proactive to address its risk. If you, I mean, the dashboard is very interesting. However, and I think that's also a work that we can do later as we develop things. what's important is the KRI. We all know the KPIs, right? The KPIs for risk. So what are your key risk indicators? And once you have identified your key risk indicators, you can, of course, put a visual behind it with a dashboard. For example, one of the key risk indicators is that you don't want your overall company risk score to go south, or meaning to go to the red zone risk. That's one of them. Another key risk indicator is the number of red zone risks that you have. Another key risk indicator could be a continuous increased trend in risk. Another key risk indicator to be drilled down, that's why we have a kind of drilled down dashboard, could be the number of days the are open. That's only some of them. And there's plenty others that could be designed more fit to your company. But yeah. Have I answered your question, Kathleen?
Yeah, I just wanted to take a minute to look. I mean, visually it looks very good. I'm just trying to figure out what does open opportunity mean?
Open opportunity. Those are the opportunities that we have out there that we are working on to increase the likelihood that they materialize.
And the different bars are like those different types, or is it or they're the higher or lower ones or something?
Can you repeat your question, Kathleen? I'm not sure I understand.
So you have five bars there. So is each bar a different type, or is it a? Oh. I'm looking at the open opportunity one.
Yeah. So here
right
you have the top opportunities, meaning high probability, high severity. Here, those are opportunities that have not yet been assessed because they are new. They've been newly identified. Those ones are medium opportunities, and those ones are small opportunities. If you will, the risk is red. This one is positive red. This one is orange. This one is positive orange. This one is green. This one is positive green. Those are the blue sky, which is the opposite of black swans, right? Yeah.
Thanks.
It's clear,
Hélène,
Kathleen? My answer is clear? Okay.
Elaine, this is Mike again. You've talked about risk appetite before, and I wonder how you use that. You've got that risk score with a gauge on it. Is that how you determine where those boundaries are, or what you're going to do to control or mitigate, or how is there a formal process for assessment of that?
Excellent question, Mike. Risk appetite and risk appetite statement is my next heavy lift to be done. So for the time being, I have had a couple of meetings with the CEO around this. It's not yet developed and formalized. I know how I want to do it. I know what it could look like, but that's another. Let's put it this way, that's another level of maturity. And actually the risk appetite and the risk appetite statement will become easier to bring in when the top risks and work in the mitigation will mature a little bit, obviously. So yeah, it's in my mind definitely since day one. It's not there yet. It's not formalized. But if you would want to share separately on how I see it, how I've done it in the past, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting model to have, especially if it's pushing the boundaries a little bit.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And here it's well, it's just like risk management. It's a lot of communication work, engaging the stakeholders, making sure they are ready. They are ready to kind of go there. In the same vein, I would say, as when a company wants to formalize a process around its strategic plan, because all these are connected actually. So, yeah, that's hope for next fiscal year. I could start like really go there in the weeds.
Thank you.
So, any other question before we go to the risk register? No? Okay. And again, I mean, we talk about this today, but we can come back to it at any time, and do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have some specific question. So I'm a fervent, I would say, proponent of keep it simple. You've heard me say that before, and above all, when a company does not have yet an enterprise structure, enterprise risk structure, you really do not want to scare people. Because first, in terms of perception, and we have to be mindful about that, because it's a kind of new role in companies, and above all, probably in public entities, there's maybe some I would say, perception that that you're coming up with. So we really want to keep it simple. The risk register, as you've seen it at WSSC Water, and again, I've seen much more complex risk register, but what are the key elements that you want in a risk register? And I think that's the question a company has to ask itself. You, of course, want to have the risk that you're talking about. Yes. You want to have a risk owner. Yes, because you want to assign the accountability at the right level, and this accountability to be recognized. You want to have your score, or you want to have your risk assessed. It is a small risk, a medium risk, or a big risk. Why? Because obviously, again, you want to focus on the big risk. So in order to do that, you need to have assessed your risk. And to come back to the point that Michael was saying earlier on in this meeting, what you really want to do is to have your causes and your consequences for this risk. For the same reason as I mentioned to Mike a moment ago, because it will help you tremendously afterwards to design your mitigation strategies. Because again, mitigating a risk is about controlling the causes that you can control, and or reducing the impact if the risk materializes. And of course, if you have identified, I would say, rigorously or strictly your causes and your consequences as you see them, and it's not cast in stone. Again, it's an iterative process. Things are changing. So you adjust your causes, you adjust your consequences. You may also adjust, of course, your mitigation strategies, because at the first thought you say, okay, oh yeah, we are going to do that. That sounds a good idea. But at the end of the day, you realize that you're going to spend a lot of efforts that are going to be either more costly or labor intensive or time intensive than the risk itself. So you're going to say, well, that was not so smart at the end of the day. Or you may not have the budget, or you may not have the resources, or you may not have the approval from whoever. So this is a continuous iterative process. So again, you may want to become more sophisticated in your risk register, but the risk, cause of the risk, impact of the risk, score of the risk, mitigation, and risk owners. If you had only 6 boxes, that's the boxes I would recommend. And after that, And of course, I mean, if we are talking risk and opportunity in your company, you want to identify if this risk is a risk or an opportunity. Any question?
Elaine, this is Cello. This was very illuminating for me. We only have just a couple of minutes. People may have, you know, appointments at 8:30. Yeah. So maybe just go around and see if anybody has any questions before we move on.
Yeah.
Chris or Rick.
Okay, Flynn.
Yeah, I'm good so far. I mean, it's a very interesting tool that you are maintaining. For sure, as Rick mentioned, we're just starting to create a risk register for liquid waste, and we're looking forward to have the discussion with our management, as well as use some of the tools that you developed, if possible.
Yeah, would it help if I was sending you this Excel spreadsheet, and again, you do whatever you want with it, or you tailor it to the needs of your organization? But would it help?
For sure, but is this in addition to what Cello has sent? Cello sent the this table as well.
Oh no, yeah, this one. Well, same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the offer.
Okay.
Okay, well, let me stop recording.